Welcome to this week's confirmation theme, God walks with us. We are not alone. Feelings of loneliness are prevalent in today's society. In fact, in a world full of different ways for us to connect to each other, people are now finding that they're actually feeling more and more alone all the time. So much so, in fact, that developers of software have developed an AI or an artificial intelligence just to help people have somebody or something to talk to.
Hello!
Is that Chad?
Good echo. Hi! Echo! Haha. Hello! Is anyone there? Hey Siri, am I cool?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Siri, are we friends?
I'm your assistant. And your friend, too.
Oh, poor Chad. But we belong to a God that does not abandon us, that reminds us that we are not alone, that God isn't just for some people on this planet and not others. God is for us all. Even when we don't feel His presence in our lives, the Bible reminds us that God is in fact walking with us. And just to make sure we understand this fact, God sometimes shows up in the most unlikely of places. Watch this.
So, I'm not Matt. I don't vlog, so I think it's super weird making a video in a store. But here I am. I needed to get some inspiration for the season, so I came to Menards to check out the wonderful world of Christmas, and oh my gosh, all kinds of stuff. Let's see what I can find here to think about what Christmas is. Looks like we got some snowmen, a soldier, Rudolph, some deer. Oh, here we go. This guy. I like him. Okay, here's another question. Who's this supposed to be? I have no idea. So tell me, do you have your giant Snoopy Christmas ornament? Why do we take trees, cut them down, put them in our house for Christmas? Honestly, what's that about? Why do we do that? Okay guys, I have 3 things for you. Thing number 1. The gospel, or good news pronouncement, as we learned last week, that comes from Matthew. Chapter 1, verse 21 says this: "She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." Now, the name Jesus was actually a common Jewish name. It was a Greek version of the Hebrew name Joshua, or Yeshua, which means the Lord saves, or God is salvation. In the Bible, names matter because names describe who a person is. They describe the essence of a person. Now, this is really cool because my name, Chad, actually means mighty warrior. I know, right? You can just see it in me. Mighty warrior. You should know this other little fun fact, that I was named after the old popular actor Chad Everett, who my mom thought was super sexy. So yeah, I have that going for me too. But in all seriousness, do you know what your name means? So if you don't, do a quick pause this video and do a quick Google search to figure out what your name means. And parents, if you have a fun story about how you were named or how your kids were named, well, share that at this time as well. And when you're ready, hit play again and we'll continue. Okay, back to my 3 things. Thing number 2, Matthew 1, verse 23 reads, "Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel." Matthew is taking a paraphrase from the Old Testament prophet Isaiah and applying it to Jesus, essentially giving him another name, Emmanuel, which means God is with us. Again, remember that names in the Bible matter because names describe who a person is. They describe the essence of a person. Thing number 3, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 14. The author writes, "And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth." John is taking the idea of God's eternal word and putting flesh on it. Literally, it's the idea of God embodying human form. That word is incarnation and applies to Jesus. The Lord saves, God is with us, the Word made flesh. Jesus, Emmanuel, incarnation. This is a big deal. A lot is being ascribed to Jesus in these short biblical texts. Essentially, they are saying that if you want to see God, if you want to know God, if you want to know the essence of God, look at Jesus. But where do we find Jesus? So where do we begin to look for Jesus at? Well, for most people, they would say churches, right? Like the one that we go to. And why would we not expect to find Jesus in church? That's what we're taught. And there's a lot of things about our church that can reflect these names that Jesus has, these great, great names. Let me just show you some stuff. Look at how big the sanctuary is. It's enormous. Look at the cool things that are here. My voice echoes in this place. We have really pretty candles in this place. Yeah, lots of candles. We got flowers and crosses and stained glass windows. So often people think that church buildings, cathedrals, these awesome, large, beautifully decorated places are Jesus' home. Why would they not be? Jesus, Emmanuel, incarnation. The Lord saves, God is with us, the Word made flesh. What else could speak to the greatness of this event? And what else could speak of these grand ideas that God is among us as these big, beautiful buildings with great decorations and neat things inside? The idea that God is with us or near to us, accessible to us, is a major part of the Christian story. However, do you know how the gospel writers talked about this? Do you know how they described it? Do you know the stories they told to help people understand the significance of Jesus' birth? I actually think you're going to be surprised. During Christmas, many people take out their nativity scenes. These are little figurines that show the birth story of Jesus, Emmanuel, the incarnate Son of God. And they all look nice and everything is clean and lovely and perfect. If your names mean the Lord saves, God is with us, and the Word made flesh, well, then what else do you expect but clean, nice, and perfect? Now, these are actually two different stories, the Christmas stories, that we combine together that are really meant to stand apart. But like any good story, they have interesting characters. So in Luke's gospel, we meet the shepherds. They are out in their fields, and angels tell them to look for Jesus in Bethlehem. Shepherds. Shepherds. This is an uneducated, stinky animal herder at the very bottom of the popularity chart. And they go and find Jesus and his parents, who are essentially homeless, taking shelter in an animal barn. Think about this scene. Where are the rich people? Where are the kings? Where's the red carpet event that welcomes someone as important as Jesus, Emmanuel, the incarnate God? The gospel writer Luke is making a point. And so is the gospel writer Matthew. In Matthew's story, Jesus' parents are not traveling anywhere. There is no manger or shepherds. Mary is presumably at home when she gives birth to Jesus. In Matthew's story, Jesus does gets some pretty awesome gifts worthy of his name. He gets gold, frankincense, and myrrh from these guys, these wise men, also known as magi, also known as non-Jewish Zoroastrian astrologers, also known as foreigners with different religious beliefs and practices that good Jewish families would never consider associating with. The gospel writer Matthew is making a point. So, what is the point of the Christmas stories, the birth stories of Jesus? They are written to help us understand where God chooses to be in the world. Jesus, Emmanuel, the incarnation, the Lord saves, God is with us, the Word made flesh, shows up in the places and to the people you would never expect. The poor, the homeless, the people who don't look or think like you. In these stories, through Jesus' names, we hear how God is near and connected to everyone, not just some. These stories in Jesus' names help us to understand that God is present everywhere in the world, in your life, your family's life, your school, and your community, but also in those places where you least expect to find God. In homeless shelters, with the unpopular kids, with families who are fighting and parents who are in the middle of a divorce. God is present with us in our fears, in our sickness, even in our death. Jesus, Emmanuel, incarnation. The Lord saves, God is with us, the Word made flesh.
Another story from the Bible towards the end of Jesus' life, not the beginning of Jesus' life, but at the very end. In fact, after he had been crucified and was buried. It happens on the road to Emmaus. There's two men, and they're walking from Jerusalem, where they had just seen all of this crazy stuff happen to a man named Jesus, somebody who they thought was going to be the Messiah. They saw it all happen. They saw Jesus get taken into custody, put on trial, and they saw him be crucified. Now, they thought Jesus was going to be this great, possibly a war hero. They thought he was going to rise up, be the new Messiah, not unlike King David and some of the heroes from the Old Testament. They thought Jesus was going to rise up and free them from the Roman occupation at the time, and maybe lead Israel, God's people, into a new way of life, and to a new freedom, and to a new kingdom that Jesus was talking about. But something happened. Jesus died. He was crucified, and it's done now. Jesus is dead. Well, I guess that is no more. What do we do? Well, let's go home. This is over with. God is obviously not with us anymore. And so these two guys are headed home. And it's at this precise moment, when they thought they were all alone, that they were actually walking right next to God. Let me read this story to you right out of the Bible. Now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed, before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel." And what is more, it's the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he was going further. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was sitting at the table with them, he took bread, he gave thanks, he broke it, and he began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on their way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. Here ends my reading of this story. Have you ever had hopes or dreams about something? Or maybe just a simple idea about the way you wanted something to go, or some event to happen, or something in your life to happen, a hope or a dream that you had, and it just didn't go your way? And in that moment, you feel alone. You feel broken. You feel like maybe even God has forgotten about you. But you see, I think from my experience, it's in those moments when we realize that God is still with us and we are not alone. All right, so let me tell you an old story from the Bible now, one found in the very beginning in the Old Testament. And these men walking to Emmaus would have heard the story many times and would have known it quite well. Perhaps you've heard it too. It's the story of God freeing the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Let me recap it really quick for you. God used a man named Moses and a series of crazy circumstances and events to lead his people out of slavery in Egypt. Now, they had been in slavery for 400 years, and God finally heard their cry to deliver them out of slavery, and he sends Moses. Moses works with the Pharaoh to deliver his people, to let them go. And eventually, he does let them go. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt at the time, lets God's people go. And so he lets them go, and now they're running free. They're running away. They're running away from slavery in Egypt now. And they get to a point in the story where there is a massive expanse of water in front of them. The Red Sea is in front of them. And at this point in time, Pharaoh has now decided that, you know what? I don't want to let them go. I'm going to send my army after them and capture them again and possibly kill them. And so behind them is Pharaoh's entire army crashing down on them. And in front of them is a sea. And it's precisely at this moment where they feel like God has forgotten about them and they are about to die. But it's precisely in this moment that God shows up. Let me read to you out of Exodus chapter 14, verses 12 through 14, what it says here. The people said, "Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." They're starting to lose hope here. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." In other words, trust that God is walking with us. And it was precisely in that moment that God showed his people that he was with them. And he led them through the sea, out of Egypt and out of slavery. God was still, in fact, working with them. And it was revealed to them. And what could have been their darkest moment ended up being their deliverance out of slavery. And God had delivered them. And so we fast forward now to the time of Jesus again, and we find these two men, and really everybody who was following Jesus at the time, mourning the loss of Jesus. They had just watched Jesus die. They thought that Jesus was going to be this great, possibly a war hero, a war leader, but for surely the Messiah who's going to rise up and lead Israel in a new way and lead them into, like I said, into a new way of life and into God's kingdom. They had all these ideas of what that was going to be like, except something happened. Jesus, in fact, died. And so now they're just like, now what do we do? And then Jesus showed up and he revealed to the people at the time what his plan was all along: to be put to death, to be put on that cross, so that he would carry the burden of sin and death for the entire world to the cross and bury it and put it in the grave and rise from the dead the next day to say that the power of sin and death is no more. He delivered us out of slavery all over again. And in what may have been these two's darkest moments, Jesus shows up and reveals that they are not alone, that God himself was walking with them. What if this was true? What if we have a God who walks with us all of the time, whether we feel his presence or not? The people walking on the road to Emmaus that day thought that they were alone, but they were in fact walking right next to Jesus. Could Jesus be walking alongside you today, whatever you're going through, good, bad, or monotonous? What if Jesus was in it with us no matter what? And it didn't matter if we had a good day or a bad day, if your ideas of what this life should be pan out or not. If you feel and see Jesus really close to you and you feel his presence or you don't, what if in fact it's just true that Jesus walks with us through it all? I believe he does. I believe he's in it with you always. I believe he will be with you always from the beginning to the end. One of the first things the Bible points out is that Jesus' name shall be called Emmanuel, which means God is with us. And one of the last things Jesus said to his disciples was, surely I will be with you even to the end of the age. One of the first things we learned about Jesus and one of the last things we learned about Jesus was his name is Emmanuel, God is with us. And he said to his disciples before he was taken into heaven, surely I will be with you always. I shared a little bit in my last message about hurting my knee my senior year playing high school football. What I haven't shared yet is that I actually hurt my knee the year before that too, my junior year. Halfway through my junior year was when I actually really hurt my knee really bad, and I had to have total ACL reconstructive surgery. I thought for sure that that was the end of my career playing football. Not much of one, junior in high school and I'm done. But what happened though is I got the surgery and I got a call from my pastor at my church. He wanted to lose some weight and get it back in shape, and I wanted to rehabilitate my knee. So we simply started getting together and working out. Fast forward to the next football season, and I was stronger than I had ever been. And I made varsity and I played my entire senior year until that last game again when I tore some more cartilage and couldn't play anymore. But I had learned a ton in that time. And in one of those dark moments of my life when I had torn my knee and I thought, my football career was over, I learned that God was still with me, that God was walking with me. And I learned so much during that time, and it actually made me a stronger player the following year. And I also talked about in my last message about ending a bad relationship before my year of joining the Young Adults and Global Missions program. I didn't really share though at that time. I felt so broken as far as getting into relationships went. I felt so broken during that time that I felt like there might not be anybody out there for me. Like I was too broken to actually be in a relationship. Like I just could not make it work. I was too busted up. And so I said, Lord, here I am, take me as you will. I'm here to just serve you this year, and I'm not going to worry about it this year. And it was during that year that I met a girl who was also in the Young Adults and Global Missions program, who would end up becoming my best friend, and then later on my fiance, and now my wife of 9 years. And God walked with me through all of that. And of course, as many of you know, 2 years ago, I became a father for the first time, which was one of the most exciting and most, one of the scariest days of my life. I just prayed that I would be a good dad. I didn't know the first thing about being a dad, really, honestly. I tried to read a few books, but I didn't know what I was doing. And so you bring your child home for the first night, and those first couple of months are just every night you're waking up every couple of hours to rock him back to sleep or to give him some milk or to feed him. But it was in one of those moments, I couldn't even tell you when, but I remember it was in the middle of the night, and I'm holding my son and he's crying, and I'm rocking him back to sleep, and he finally nods off and he goes back to sleep. Where I just felt the Lord say to me, as you are holding your son, so I am holding you. And I knew God was walking with me, and I knew I wasn't in this alone, that my Heavenly Father was going to teach me how to be a good dad too. And of course now, Wally is almost 2 years old, and one of the things I love to do with him is to just take him on walks. He loves to explore. He loves to just cruise around our neighborhood, and we go to parks. We actually go to this park that I'm in right now quite a bit, and he just loves to explore. And one thing that he does when he gets to an obstacle or something that he can't do on his own, either a step that's too big or something he wants to get on top of, or maybe something that's a little steep and he wants help down, he'll just simply stop and he'll just put his hand out. Like, he doesn't even look at me, he just puts his hand out. And that's my cue to take his hand so that he can then tackle the obstacle that's in front of him. I love it when he puts his hand out and I can help him get through whatever he's facing. Could it be that God does too? Could it be that no matter what we go through, no matter how dark it looks, no matter what obstacles we're facing or ordeal that we're going through, that if we reach out our hand, our great God is there to take it time and time again. And we are reminded that the Lord Jesus is still walking with us. Amen.